Wells Fargo. This is the one that has sort of taken Bank of America's place as being, the financial media's whipping post, so to speak. It just seems like they can't really do anything right. And this it wasn't the greatest quarter in the world. I think we all kind of expected that. But then, of course, you have that whole PPP loan scandal where you've got employees lying to obtain loans. I mean, it seems like it's just one thing after another. And a quote that came from the call basically said their top priority it continues to be the implementation of risk control and regulatory work. And I feel like that maybe is top priority 1A, and 1B, I mean, clearly is the culture. I mean, there is stuff going on within this company that hasn't fully really been fixed yet. But let's talk a little bit. Let's go glass half full here first. What about this quarter for Wells Fargo did you like?
Well, to be fair, they're more closely scrutinized than every other bank right now, so you're going to find a lot more.
Seems like they earned it, but go on.
Absolutely, they absolutely did. Like Buffett says, when you find a cockroach in the kitchen, there's usually not just one.
Yeah.
So now that they found the cockroach in the kitchen, which was the fake account scandal, now everything else they do is really scrutinized.
Yeah.
And the latest thing was purely employees doing things on their own. It's worth mentioning. Yeah. That's not it. They didn't defraud anybody. It didn't affect any of Wells Fargo's customers. It was employees behaving badly.
Yeah, and it wasn't really. It likely wasn't even really a faulty incentive structure. I mean, it seems like it really was just like you said. I mean, just a few bad apples.
Right, and because Wells Fargo is so scrutinized, they just kind of fell under the microscope. But this is a stock that trades for 60% of its book value, which is, I mean, a while ago, Wells Fargo, not a while ago, Wells Fargo was the most valuable bank stock by price to book.
Man.
I mean, they were regularly trading at 1.5 times book or even more.
Yeah.
And so they're trading for literally about less than half of what they used to.
That's amazing.
But going into this quarter, their net interest income was down by 19%, which Wells Fargo is purely a commercial bank, so this is to be expected in a low interest environment. They missed earnings, but they were profitable, which is definitely a good sign. Remember the second quarter the second quarter they had a big big red arrow there with profitability, and remember they had to cut their dividend because they had to set aside so much in reserves.
Yep.
That wasn't the case this quarter. They were profitable. They earned enough that if this continues, they'll be able to reinstitute their dividend where it was. They did set aside loan losses. They were the only of the big banks, I think, that actually had to build their reserves this quarter, but it was by less than was expected. They were expected to set aside about $1.8 billion. They set aside about $0.8 billion.
Right.
So that was good news. That's compared to $9.5 billion in the second quarter that they had to set aside for losses.
Holy cow.
So this is definitely an improvement.
Yeah.
But like I said, Wells Fargo is, out of the five we're talking about, is the closest thing to a pure savings and loan that we're getting out of the big banks.
Yeah.
So they are the most affected by the pandemic because they don't have that investment banking revenue to really boost their bottom line in tough times, like all the other big banks do. And it's really weighing on them. The fake account scandal was chapter 1, and then the COVID pandemic was chapter 2 in terms of just their underperformance of the market. And it doesn't seem to be letting up anytime soon. Although this quarter didn't look as bad as expected, it's still worse than the other banks because they are purely on the commercial side of the business. And, the low interest rates are just punching them in the face right now.
Yeah. And, I was looking at this earlier before we started taping, just taking a look at all five of these banks, their year-to-date performance. And listen, no one's lighting the world on fire. I mean, you've got Morgan Stanley leading the pack, and they're essentially flat for the year. All of them trailing the market, but Wells Fargo is just having just a really tough year. Shares down close to 60%. And I guess my question with Wells Fargo, before we move on, you have to believe, given the scale of this bank, given its presence in the mortgage space, given its presence in the consumer banking space, I mean, this is not a bank that's just going to go away. It can't happen. It feels like this really is a value play, right? I don't feel like this is a value trap. It may take a little bit longer, but given how far the stock has fallen, I mean, how are you looking at this? You looking at this more as a value play, or do you feel like this is more like a value trap?
Well, for all of their flaws, Wells Fargo has a pretty impressive history of low risk lending.
Yeah.
This is how they were able to pick up Wachovia at a fire sale price during the financial crisis. This is how they, you know, their stock got hit worse than most in the 0809 period. They have a long history of responsible risk management.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's changed. I don't think their and we saw just the loan losses, the reserves they had to set aside were a lot less than expected this quarter, because we're seeing this the COVID losses kind of play out a little bit better, more favorably than expected. I see them definitely at 60% of book value as a value play. I
Yeah.
don't think Wells Fargo is going to go away. I don't even really think there's a good chance that any of the big banks are going to get acquired. I just think they're going to, survive this storm and move on.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really think it's going to do that much permanent damage to their profitability. I mean, the bigger issue is the interest rates for them. The low interest environment's killing them. The Federal Reserve penalty, the restriction where they're not allowed to grow, I think is still in place. I know it was lifted temporarily for PPP reasons, but I think generally that Fed restriction is still in place. But I think they're gonna make it. They're not gonna go away anytime soon.